This episode is brought to you in part by the members of the American Homebrewers Association, who invite you to celebrate Learn to Homebrew Day on Saturday, November 2nd. Spread the joy of homebrewing. Find a Learn to Homebrew Day event near you. Visit homebrewersassociation.org and click Events. That's homebrewersassociation.org and click Events. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 24th, 2019. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, it's part 2 of our visit to Little Rock Breweries with Rebel Kettle. Founder John Lee isn't afraid to step out of traditional style guidelines to create beers that are fun, but also very tasty and drinkable. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other Basic Brewing gear. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. And if you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And thanks to everybody who's helping out. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter, and thanks to everybody who's done so. Financial supporters this week will see an early release of our Halloween show, which is a lot less Halloween-y than previous years, to tell you the truth. This year I used bourbon from Pine Bluffs Distilling up in Wyoming to brew an extract bourbon stout that is pretty darn tasty and easy to brew, too. Since last week's show, I brewed a big, dark Belgian ale. It's been a while since I've brewed a Belgian-inspired beer, and boy, that took off. And really, I had to clean up some foam a couple of times. It wasn't to the level of being a disaster, thank goodness. But I think that will be a delicious beer. I also bottled my cider, and it took the extra step to spike half the batch with cinnamon whiskey. So I'm very interested to see how that turns out. So let's hear a word from our friends and sponsors at Tavour. Tavour is a way to select delicious craft beers that you may not be able to find in your area and have them delivered to you. It's not a Beer of the Month club where somebody else chooses the beer for you. You only pay for the beer that you choose over the course of the month. Signing up for Tavour is free. Just create an account at Tavour.com. That's T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com. And download their iPhone or Android app, and you'll receive notifications for 2 new beers each day that are available for purchase with in-depth tasting notes from Philip at Tavour. This month, look for selections from Superstition Meadery, 903 Brewers, Garvey's Point, Crane Brewing, Elder Pine, and Ursula. If you're not interested in the beers that you see, no worries. Just skip the ones you don't want. However, when you see something that you do want, and you will, don't wait. Just click on it to get it and add it to your crate. And your beer arrives fresh every few weeks, allowing you enough time to fill a box and pay the least shipping. So why don't you check it out? It doesn't cost anything to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase anything. In fact, if I can ask you a favor, go to Tavour.com, T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or download the app, and when you sign up, enter the promo code Basic Brewing, that's all one word, and you'll get $10 off your first shipment of $25 or more. So that's $10. Again, it's free to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase. Sign up at Tavour.com, T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or with the Tavour app and enter Basic Brewing as the promo code. Thanks to everybody who's done that already. I posted a picture on Instagram this week of some peppers that our friend Ed Nicholson gave me. You may remember Ed from his appearance on Basic Brewing Video, making his hot sauce recipe with habaneros. Well, Ed gave me a whole bunch of Brazilian starfish peppers, which I had not heard of before, and they're really cool looking. And he also gave me a few ghost peppers and a bunch of Carolina Reapers, which at least at one time were the hottest peppers in the world. We're talking 1.5 million Scoville units. When he came over to make the hot sauce a few years ago, I tried a teeny little piece of the Carolina Reaper flesh, and boy, it lit me up. It's very, very hot. So I've been wanting to play around with fermented hot sauce. The hot sauce that I've been using uses vinegar and is not naturally fermented. And, when in the middle of a pepper growing season, when you're pulling peppers off every week or every day, it's a great way to crank out a lot of tasty sauce in a short period of time. However, now that fall is here and my habanero plant is slowing down in its production, I want to see if I can do a lactic fermentation to make some hot sauce that way. Right now, my plan is to put together a mix of my habaneros with the starfish peppers, the ghost peppers, and the Carolina Reapers, and then add some carrots, onions, and garlic, as I usually do with the standard hot sauce recipe that I use from Ed. And if you haven't seen that recipe, it's really a delicious recipe. Go to YouTube and search for Basic Brewing and Habanero, and you can see two versions, the original stovetop version and then the Instant Pot version as well. Anyway, my plan is to make a brine, chop up the ingredients, and then let nature take its course to see if I can get a lactic fermentation. So I'll keep you updated on that, so stay tuned. Hey, good news from our friends and sponsors, Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. From now until the end of October, High Gravity is offering free shipping on beer and wine kits. Go to highgravitybrew.com and check out the massive number of kits that are available. For example, just in the High Gravity beer kits, you have some beers like Boggy Bottom Barley Wine, Dave's Double Dog Dare You IPA, Desiree's Cream Ale, Double Major Belgian Style Double, and that's just a random selection of beers that I'm apparently in the mood for big beers. And many of these recipes have been featured at Pippin's Tap Room there at High Gravity, so they're taste tested by the public before they get to you. And on the wine side of things, High Gravity has wine kits from the super fancy to the simple sippers. So making wine is super easy with a wine kit if you've never done it before. Kind of like making Kool-Aid almost and just adding yeast to it. It's a little more complex than that, but not much compared to brewing beer. And if you compare the price per bottle, it makes a lot of sense to make your own wine. And until the end of October, shipping on beer and wine ingredient kits is free. Check it all out at family-owned and operated highgravitybrew.com. Free shipping on beer and wine ingredient kits until the end of October at highgravitybrew.com. Okay, as I said last week, I'm so happy I finally got down to Little Rock to visit with a couple of breweries down there. Just down the block from Lost 40, who we heard from last week, is Rebel Kettle. Now, John Lee served me some tasty fun beers that, kind of bend or break style guidelines, but I have to say that the Crowler of Oktoberfest that I took home was a really solid example of the style. So, Rebel Kettle can brew outside the lines, but they're also very good at hitting the style marks, too. John Lee, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, thank you for having me, James.
Where are we at?
We're at Rebel Kettle Brewing Company here in Little Rock.
We are surrounded by big, beautiful stainless steel fermenters, and your tasting room out front is really nice. And I took a look at the menu. The food menu is also looking good. But talk about the brewery. First of all, where did the name come from, and then what got it into your head to start a brewery?
Okay, so back in 2013, I started putting this together. I mean, I was just homebrewing in the garage, and it kind of came to me that we really didn't have many breweries here in Little Rock. And at that time, I mean, we had obviously Diamond Bear, Beano's, and I guess it was Bosco's then. And so those are the only three that we really had. But no one was really kind of pushing the envelope with beer styles and stuff that I was seeing all around the country. So my plan was to become actually the first nano brewery, and I was typically gravitated towards styles that weren't usually like your norm. So I was really infatuated with breweries like Dogfish Head and Scar City. They were doing these fun and funky things, and so these are the kind of the beers that I was brewing. And really kind of wanted to get that out there.
So you wanted to live life on the edge.
A little bit, yeah. And so that's essentially where the name came from. It really means a rebellion against average beer.
And I read in Brian Sorensen's book on Arkansas beer that you started this idea with a pumpkin beer. Is that right?
Well, kind of, yes. There was I'm trying to think which festival that was back in 2013. I do believe it was the Arkansas Times Craft Beer Festival. My now business partners, they tasted a beer called Red Rum Pum, which is an imperial amber ale that's aged in Caribbean rum barrels. And so they were kind of blown away by it, and this actually brought them to me. And from there, this is where Rebel Kettle began.
You're aware of the reputation that pumpkin beers have nowadays. Everybody, they make jokes about, oh my God, it's pumpkin beer season and all that. But done well, a pumpkin beer can be a good thing.
Absolutely. And the funny thing about Red Rum Pum, I mean, I set out to make a pumpkin beer that I actually enjoyed. And so, obviously, it needed to be high ABV and kind of low on the spice and let some of the other flavors kind of carry it through. So, I mean, it's a little sweet in the finish, kind of cover up that big alcohol percentage where it's usually around about 11%. And the rum barrel character, obviously, it covers a lot of that spice note, too. So, it's a really nice blend.
So, we've got a flight of four beers in front of me. And what do we start with first?
Well, I wanted to start with the beer that I didn't want to brew. So this is our blonde ale called Working Class Hero. When we first started, Jason, Kim, and I, my business partners, when we first started putting this together, they felt that we needed that kind of that flagship crossover kind of beer in the craft beer. Turns out they were correct. Working Class Hero has been our number one seller since day one. It is the one that you will probably see out in the market mostly, and Jason loves to throw it in my face that he was right, still to this day. But I mean, he's right though. I mean, for the drinkers here in Little Rock, this is the one that can bring them in and then kind of introduce them to what else we do.
So this is your gateway beer.
Absolutely, it is, and it's been a huge hit for us. We recently started putting in cans for sale out of the brewery. They're doing very well, and we just continue to keep pushing it outside in the market, and it just continues to grow.
Well, it's tasty. It's nice and clean and super drinkable. It is not a challenging beer at all, but it's not meant to be. And I could drink a bunch of that on a hot summer day or a cold winter night. I mean, it's just a year-round good beer. Talk about the recipe. You're talking to homebrewers, around the world, so they want to know details. Okay,
it starts with a pale ale malt base, and there's a little bit of wheat in there. Aside from that, lemon hops up top, and that's it. I mean, it's a very simple, straightforward beer.
What's a hopping schedule like?
Let's see. We do a 60 and a 30. Yeah. So, I mean, then that's it. Again, very light. Comes in at about 15 IBU.
Well, it's very nice. Like I say, very clean. I keep wanting to drink more of it. A friend and I are headed from Hot Springs back home, and so I've got my designated driver out in the room there. But still, there are a few bathroom stops on the way. So don't be offended if I don't drink all of these generous samples.
That's quite all right.
So talk about your path. I mean, how's it been? I mean, since you got started. What were the challenges in getting a foothold, or did you gain, a foothold right away getting into the business?
I'd like to say we did. I mean, the biggest challenge was actually opening. I mean, it took us 8 months to start the build-out back in 2015, so we weren't able to open until March of 2016. But aside from that, I mean, everything's gone very well. When we first started putting this together, I mean, we weren't going to have a restaurant. And we felt it was kind of necessary, and I'm glad we did because that actually has helped bring people in and kind of to get noticed the beer. I mean, when we first opened, we opened with, was it 4 7-barrel fermenters and 2 7-barrel brights, and right off the bat, we were undersized. I mean, it was just like we couldn't make enough beer. And so shortly after that, we brought in a 15. And since then, we've brought in, how many more? We've actually taken out we took out 3 of those 7s, which they went over to a sour program that we started here back in January. And then to replace those, we brought in 15. So, wow. Yeah, we basically doubled in capacity, just this year.
Wow. And it's a family environment. I walked in and there were kids, in the dining room, and it is a very welcoming environment.
No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Jason, Kim, and myself and my wife, we all have kids, and it's definitely family. It's a family business, basically.
Talk about your system. We're sitting here, like I say, surrounded by stainless.
Yeah.
Talk about your system.
It's fantastic. So it's a 7-barrel Premier stainless system. It's done everything that I can imagine. I mean, we used to have a small, basically pilot system, which is it was a half-barrel system, and it got to the point where we just weren't using it because it was easier to do 200 gallons than it was to do 15.
Wow. And so you can, is it flexible in doing everything that you want to do, and in bending the styles that you want to bend?
For the most part, steam would be nice, of course. We could do some step matches and stuff like that. But, we've made it work. We've kind of had to reconfigure it so we can do kettle sours, which we do a lot of. But other than that, though, it really works great.
Talk about the beer number 2. This is a cloudy beer.
No, it for sure is. That is our Southern Snake Charmer Mango Habanero IPA.
Wow. There's a ton of fruit on the nose.
It is. There's a whole lot of mango in there. There's about 4 pounds of habanero in there. Kind of gives you a nice spicy finish in the back, but it is kind of like second to the fruit.
Yeah. In fact, it's you might be scared of a habanero beer, but this is you do get a lot of the fruit on the front end. And there is, when I sipped it the first time before I knew there was habanero in there, I said, "Ooh, this is spicy."
Right.
So it's not a pepper heat. It's more of a black pepper than like a pepper.
Well, you also may be picking up there is a little rye in there. So it's basically a Pilsner base with some rye and also some honey malt. Basically only flame out hops. We're going for those big juicy hop aromas. Using Amarilla Citra, and I believe Econaut was in there. But that's the goal, is kind of keep it juice forward.
And you've achieved it.
Right, thank you.
How did you? First of all, let's talk about the fruit. The mango. How did you use the fruit in the beer?
Okay, it's re-fermented mango puree, basically. So, a few days in, probably 3 or 4 days in, we'll push the fruit on and let it just go ahead and ferment out.
In a secondary fermentation kind of way.
Yeah, we actually do it during primary and then typically before dry hopping, and that way we can pull. But we try to leave it on the fruit for about 2 weeks.
And what about the peppers? How do you get that pepper in there?
The pepper actually it goes in the flame out, so we basically just run it during the whirlpool and let it so all hot side on the peppers.
So how much pepper per barrel, or is there a if you're a home brewer and you're thinking how much habanero can I put in there?
That's the funny thing is I probably would have liked a little bit more heat and pepper character this year, but again peppers in general are going to be you're never going to know what you're going to get. We recently did another beer that we do called El Camino, which is a collaboration with a local metal band here, and it's a porter, Chipotle porter, and I did 10 pounds. So it was 4 pounds of poblano, 3 pounds of jalapeno, and what's the rest there? Almost 3 pounds of habanero. So, and that one's definitely got some spice kick to it, but that's meant to be. With the name El Camino.
Oh yeah. And is it seeds and all?
Yes. Yeah. Basically, just process them. I typically and then just we'll bag them, and then. Again, we'll just run them in the whirlpool.
Wow, that's really nice. And talk about the hopping strategy, because it's interesting because you get the mango and then you get the hops in there, and habanero peppers do have a juicy or a fruity flavor. Before you get the heat, you get this nice fruity characteristic. So that all blends in together. It's kind of a fruit salad in a good way of a beer. So talk about the hopping strategy.
We've actually, as far as hopping here, we've changed up because it's not simply like you would in a homebrew setup, because you gotta imagine that those hops are sitting in temperatures above 180 degrees for at least 30-45 minutes when you're knocking out. So again, for this beer, we wanted to keep the IBU somewhat low. I think we were in about the 25 to 30 range. But they go in at flame out. We do a short whirlpool, and then we knock out. So again, they're sitting in there for a good 45 minutes or so just to go. But so with a lot of the IPAs, we've kind of changed our strategies. I mean, we're even doing things where we're knocking the kettle down below 180, and then adding more hops. So we're not pulling in those alphas, and that's become a big part of our IPAs.
Yeah, it's something that I've begun playing with more, doing hop stands.
Yep.
I mean, going from home brewing to commercial brewing. In home brewing, we were always taught cool down the wort just as quick as possible,
Right.
To avoid contamination. That's the thing. And so by putting your hops in at the end of the boil, and then cooling off as quickly as possible, you're probably robbing yourself of a lot of those juicy hop aromas and flavors that you're getting, because you're not doing it the same way anymore. So I think that it's important that homebrewers know that they can play with doing hop stands and doing, like you were saying, reducing the temperature and holding it there for a while to experiment and see what kind of juicy character that you can get.
Yeah, I mean, and then playing with different varieties as well. I mean, we keep quite a different variety of hops here, and so we're always playing with combinations and things like that. But again, yeah, I mean, it depends what you're going for. I feel like with a lot of the IPAs, we actually decreased IBUs quite a bit in a lot of them, and we feel like they're better. They come across better to people that are just kind of getting into craft beer and learning about IPAs. Just so there's not that bitterness in your face like it used to be 10 years ago when you get those 1,000 IBU beers. But
And there seems to be kind of a fatigue developing with IPAs. And I'm looking at social media, and people are saying, "Oh, I go into a tap room and they've got like 7 IPAs and 1 wheat beer." So that it seems to be, at least among the accounts that I see, sort of a backlash against hoppy or bitter beers. Are you seeing that here now?
Possibly. I mean, again, a lot of the beers that we've kind of experimented with lately are on the sweeter side, and yeah, they've been well received. Let's just put it that way. And I think IPAs are kind of the same way. A lot of people would had those IPAs several years ago when they were very bitter, and kind of threw them off. And I think beer's changing. You see a lot of influx of these, alcohol waters coming in and stuff like that, and people want those fruity kind of sweet flavors.
Are you guys getting the hard seltzer yet?
No, we're there, there's no plan for us to do anything on the seltzer side. We're going to continue to do what we're doing. I mean, here 3.5 years in, we're well over 200 different beers. We try to release a new beer every Thursday. We've maybe missed, let's just say 10 times in 3.5 years, just for various reasons. But this the last one that we released, which is I guess you're about to get to, is that Imperial Coffee Donut Stout. Not this one, but this is one of our biggest sellers so far. I mean, it's been flying, and it's extremely sweet beer. I mean, it was intentionally meant to be a dessert beer. I mean, it finishes at the same gravity as where Working Class starts.
Wow.
Yeah.
So spoiler alert, that beer's coming,
sorry.
at the end here.
Ahead, yeah.
But that's got my interest peaked. So what was the biggest challenge for you in going from home brewing to craft beer? Because it sounds like you've still got the homebrewer's mentality of, I want to do this now and I want to do that now, and so you're still getting to play. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
It really is. I mean, it's kind of fantastic that we had that small pilot system, and it got to the point where we just weren't using it because it was easier to do this. And we're confident enough now in our brewing skills that we can pretty much do anything. And on this size, I mean, you're talking about a couple hundred gallons. We're able to move within at least 6-8 weeks, and so it really is that much fun. We keep our staples here. Which is about 5 different beers that we try to keep year round. We do have some seasonals, but for the rest of it, we just always trying something new, and that was the basis of Rebel Kettle, was trying to use different ingredients, use different processes, and really kind of just make unique beer that people aren't used to getting.
Speaking of unique, number 3 here has a pinkish hue, as Steve and I like to reference from Seinfeld. Her cheek, is there a pinkish hue? There's a hue. This is a fun beer. It's cloudy. It's pink. What do we got?
So we're calling this it's kind of our new series. We're calling it this one a Blueberry Dream Ale. We did a strawberry version, and it was also very well received. So it's essentially like you would take and make a let's just say smoothie IPA without the hops, and then just load it with fruit. And we're only serving them on nitro.
There we go. Yeah, that's the difference. I was like, wow, what is that? And I should have known. I mean, I rarely get nitro beers anymore, but it's the nitro really. It's like a it's a fruit smoothie, and it's kind of like one of those the popsicles, that are, I can't remember the name of them, but they're kind of a creamy frozen popsicle.
Like the Dreamsicle, because there is vanilla. It's vanilla and fruit, and loaded with a ton of flake grains, essentially.
I'm still sipping. You got to give me details of the recipe while I drink.
Yeah, it's it's a Pilsner base. I think we got about 30% flake grains in there as well. We may have thrown some honey malt in there to kind of retain some of that sweetness as well. I'm certain it was probably mashed super high, probably 156, 157, somewhere in there. Just again to kind of retain that sweetness, and then the same process with the fruit. So we're re-fermenting. With this one, we used 442 pounds of blueberry puree, and then I can't even remember the weight on the vanilla, but it was. So there's a lot that goes into these beers, but again, I mean, it's what you get out of them. It what counts, and we really try and like kind of overdo, and then and hopefully we hit. The cool thing, so with the strawberry one, I mean, it was just basically like a same recipe, but with this one, we actually kettle soured it for about 24 hours. So we dropped the pH down to like 3.7. And then we finished the beer out. We were hoping that it would make the blueberries pop a little more. Whether or not it does or not, but I mean, they definitely come through.
Yeah, I was going to say it's tart, and I was going to ask if that was just from the fruit. Yeah. And I think that you need something like that, because there's no hop presence in here. So, but you've got to have something to balance the sweetness. And it's not a syrupy, cloying sweetness. It's a nice, fresh fruit sweetness, but that tartness in there really gives it a balance where it's not overpoweringly sweet. It's just nice and drinkable. It makes it drinkable.
Thank you for saying that, because that's exactly what we were going for. Not with working, or never having been working with blueberries on that level, or that amount. We weren't sure what kind of sweetness they would bring. We've noticed that, and so we do an annual beer called Summer Jam, which is a raspberry sour saison. Well, it finishes super dry, but even when it's really dry, though, the fruit brings the character, even though it's fermented out, it brings this sweetness. I mean, the perception of sweetness. And so with that beer, I mean, it is sour, so it does balance it out, and that's what we were thinking for this beer.
Yeah, it's great. It's like the fruit character is a bit reminiscent of the raspberry tart from New Glarus.
Okay, yeah.
Which is one of my favorite beers.
Yeah.
This doesn't have with that beer, there's more of a malt presence, so it's kind of like the crust to the pie. This is more of a fruity thing, but the fruit character it reminds me a lot of that New Glarus beer, and that's a big compliment. But because there's a balance there, it's not just super sweet fruit. There is that tart there as well.
No, thank you. Yeah. Again, we're with these experimental beers, I mean, we do the best we can, and we've even made beers where like we've had to back up and kind of like change it completely. But this one kind of came through as expected, and we'll probably continue the series and kind of keep playing with it because they've been so well received. I mean, I think serving them on nitro really helps. It just obviously enhances the creaminess of the beer, and keeps people coming back because they can't take growlers.
Yeah, you probably don't want to. You don't want to package this and let it out of your building, do you?
No, I mean we've talked about it. I mean we do have a canning line, and there is a. I mean we could add a nitro system to it, but we haven't really entertained that idea just yet. I mean I'd like to eventually, but down the road, let us play with it more and figure out what we're doing, and then maybe we can do those. But
and this is probably a delicate beer, such that you may be concerned about. If someone did take a crowler home and they forgot it in their car and it got warm, and that would probably at least harm the freshness of the flavor. So this is kind of maybe one of your babies you want to keep in the house to make sure that it's good.
Yeah, well, I guess I think about all my beers out there kind of like babies the same way. Yeah, yeah. You wonder how they're treated outside of here, but you hope people get the experience like they would here, because we religiously clean our lines here. We obviously try to make sure that the beer is just tip top when it goes into somebody's glass.
And now we come to the to the dark one at the end here. This is oh my goodness. Just smelling it, it's roasty, and roasty as far as grain and roasty as far as coffee. All right, talk about this one while I sip.
Great. Yeah, this is a fun beer that started about 8 months ago. I approached John at a community bakery, and then also Jim over at Guillermo's Coffee about doing a collaboration. And it took me that long to finally get this thing in the into the mash tun about 3 weeks ago. So the idea was to basically create a dessert beer, a pastry stout, imperial stout. And so it's a coffee donut imperial stout. It's the recipe was actually based off our annual barrel-aged imperial stout called Black Rain. So took that and basically added. Well, I cut a few things out, but I mean it's pale malt, a ton of roasted barley, chocolate malt, crystal malts. Pretty straightforward there, and then we added a ton of lactose on top of that for this. OG came in and I believe was at 1.118, somewhere in there. Just a small beer, and finished out at like 1042. So bring us right around 10%. We also threw 8 dozen donuts in the mash, and then it was 4 pounds of Colombian coffee that went into at 195 in the kettle. So,
and was that ground or whole or?
It's ground. Yeah, we bag it and throw it in and just let it basically in a whirlpool, just like we would some other things. But yeah,
it's funny, you can put coffee anywhere in the process, so it's interesting to hear how people handle it and where people put it.
Yeah. So we do a nitro coffee stout called Business Casual, and we actually use it in the kettle, and then we use it secondary as well. So we feel like we get a better aroma doing it secondary, but we get a better flavor in the kettle. But I don't know. Yeah, again, it's just preference, I suppose.
This is a lot more drinkable than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, when you tell somebody like somebody that knows about brewing, and you tell them, it's a 1040 OG. I mean, FG. I mean, you're gonna wait, that's crazy, right? No, it actually balances out pretty well. Even though we were right around about 30 IBU, I find it pretty drinkable, other than the ABV. Yeah.
I would have said that it was around 1020 maybe, because it is, it's a big mouthfeel, but it's not gloppy at all, and there's enough going on with the roastiness from the grains, and it's not an acidity, but there's an edge to the coffee and the grain flavor that helps balance that sweetness. So yeah, it's really tasty.
Thank you.
And what do the donuts bring to the beer? Is it more of a is it more of a novelty, or is there actual donut character in there?
I feel like there's donut character in there. Maybe it's a novelty, but regardless, it's a tasty beer. Again, this is the first time we've ever tried anything like this, and I feel like doing this gives me more confidence of doing things more like this. Just because of the reception it's gotten. we did 20 cases of cans, and we released them on Thursday, which 3 days ago, and they're almost gone. So I mean, I mean, numbers don't lie, and obviously people like it. I mean, I was surprised earlier. I mean, I saw we already had a keg blown of it, and I was just like, wait a minute. I'm like, I mean, we're serving it in like 10-ounce pours, and like, that's a lot of pours. Yeah, that is. I mean, so I mean, the public speaks, I suppose, and if this is what they like, I mean, this is what I'll give them.
So we haven't talked about yeast at all. I've forgotten to ask through the whole flight. So what is do you have a one go-to yeast that you kind of stick with, or do you have a range of yeast varieties that you use?
For the most part, we only use 2 yeast. Our number one is dry English ale yeast, and that's pretty much everything that you've tasted, I believe. Yeah. I say this maybe because occasionally we'll use 05 on some of the fruit beers, but I'm trying to think if we actually used it on the blueberry beer or not. I can't remember. And that's typically just for simplicity, and then a cleaner flavor kind of thing. But in the other one is a kind of a combination of saison yeast. So we have a blend of 3 different yeast, which is French saison, DuPont, and saison 2. So, but I mean, we feed that pitch, and we've actually had that pitch in a brink that we use and reuse and keep feeding. Typically with the blonde ale, we've had it for almost a year now, and so we buy a pitch and just keep using it, and it seems to work really great. I feel like the 3711, the French saison's probably taken over, or it does eventually, but again, this is what we use on a number. We always typically at least have a few saisons on tap.
And what do you do as far as temperature control on those yeasts? Do you do anything with letting the temperature rise and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with 007 though, we usually run depending on the beer, but we'll usually start in the low 60s and let it come up for the majority of fermentation at 65, and then as it starts tailing off, we'll bring it up to 72. With the saison yeast, it's just free rise. So we try to pitch mid 60s if the weather will let us, and then just let it go. I mean, it'll see temps of about 85 to almost 90. Yeah.
Well, all of these beers are delicious and clean, and weird and funky, not in a traditionally beer flavor funky way, but in a playful way, which it sounds like that you're not just going willy-nilly and throwing things into the into the beer. There's a thought process that goes along with how do you make something like this fun but also drinkable.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the most important part, and probably the most fun too. Is starting with a thought of a beer and creating the recipe. I mean, whether or not be basically in your head, and then getting it on paper, and going, and then actually seeing it kind of grow, and then what it comes out to be. And hey, did I get it? Did I hit my numbers? Did I hit the flavor profiles that I was looking for? And even the best part, though, I mean, we've done so many different beers that we can kind of determine, I say, somewhat, I mean, to where it's going to end up. I mean, at least you hope. Sometimes it goes awry, but for the most part, if you know what you're doing, or you have an idea where it's going to go, it's probably going to get pretty close.
So what's the future for Rebel Kettle? Are you gonna stay small and weird, or?
Yeah, I mean that's the goal right now, is kind of just grow it slow. I mentioned earlier that we started a sour program back in January. We're hoping to unveil that this winter. We have we have 4 different beers right now. They've all been, one was a Brett, but the other 3 were all barrel aged. And they should go into bottles either next week or the week after. So again, hopefully in a few months we'll release those. And then we're also we've also purchased another building in Conway, so we're looking to open hopefully next year there.
So serving the beer that's made here, or actually brewing there as well?
It'll have its own brewery there too. So the goal would be probably still be brewing the staples like we have here, like Working Glass, Easy Roller, our IPA. Those, like I mentioned, the 5 beers, and then all the rest will be different.
Well, this has been fun. I'm glad that I'm finally getting into, I've been doing this podcast since 2005, and this is the first, foray into Little Rock that we've done this weekend, and I'm looking forward to coming back.
I appreciate you coming in, and please do. I'm sure we'll have a bunch of different beers when you do.
Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you.
Well, thanks again to John, and thanks to Becca Bona for helping to set up the interview, and I may have to start detouring through Little Rock on my way to Hot Springs when I go home to visit the family. It was a fun time to visit my old neighborhood. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.